The U.S. is holding back-to-back negotiations with Russia and Ukraine aimed at ending the three-year war, but major differences remain. High-stakes discussions are underway in Riyadh, where the U.S. and Russian negotiators are meeting just hours after Washington sat down with Kyiv. Officials say the talks are focusing on technical issues like Black Sea security and a pause in long-range attacks. Another round of talks between the U.S. and Ukraine set to follow. While Moscow and Kyiv agreed in principle to a limited ceasefire last week, disagreements remain over what's off limits. Cross-border attacks have also continued. Well, let's get more now from Caroline Malone joining us live from Washington, D.C., and Dasha Chernyshova, who is in Moscow. But let's start with you first, Caroline. I want to know what exactly is Washington pushing for in these talks, and how does it walk that very fine line about balancing what Moscow wants and what Kyiv wants?
Absolutely. Well, the US is really hopeful that this is the beginning of a process that will lead to an eventual ceasefire and end of the war between Ukraine and Russia. But these do appear to be very much early days discussions on that. We've got the US and Russia holding discussions in Saudi Arabia on Monday. That follows on from US-Ukraine discussions that were happening on Sunday, also in Saudi Arabia, in particular technical discussions on a maritime ceasefire. That has to do with the Black Sea. That has to do with a cessation of violence in that area. But in particular for Ukraine, that's an important area because it's where it used to export one of its chief commodities. That's grain, wheat, that used to be one of the most important elements of its economy. So that will be very important for Ukraine to agree to some progress so that potentially it can continue to export its grain to the rest of the world. However, these talks on Monday, US and Russia talks, are what's described as low-level talks, which I think gives us some indication of how early we are in this process. Having said all that, the US envoy, Steve Witkoff, is remaining optimistic. He's said that there's real progress being made, in particular with the Black Sea and maritime discussion, and that he's hopeful this will eventually lead to a ceasefire of shooting, essentially to an end, at least in a short-term basis, of the fighting overall. I think, though, it is important to recognise that President Donald Trump had originally said he could end this war in a day. He then went on to say it would be 100 days. We're now 60-odd days into his presidency. From Washington's perspective, they are very much keen to end this conflict as soon as possible. So you can expect to see all the US officials continuing to push both the Russian side and the Ukraine side to trust build and really to make some tangible progress here.
Thank you. Now, Dasha, you heard Caroline there saying it's low-level talks, meaning still very early days. But the Kremlin is still saying that them and the US have a common understanding of what is needed in the settlement. So what can we draw from that statement? And what do we know of Moscow's terms in relation to this partial truce?
Well, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has been very vocal about this common understanding, stressing that this is about the political will and the desire to move forward on the negotiations track. So at this stage, we understand the talks are being discussing the technical issues, and those are very important technical issues, but they are also very difficult. We are hearing also the negotiators from the Russian team, including Grigory Karasin, who was quoted by Russia's news outlets as saying that without that mutual understanding and political desire, the negotiators wouldn't be sitting there for more than 3 hours already. So the clear picture is that there is desire to move forward. We understand that one of the key issues, part of those discussions, is the security and safety of navigation in the Black Sea. The Kremlin confirming that this will be the main focus of those talks. It was the initiative that has been introduced by the US President Donald Trump during the phone conversation with Vladimir Putin last week. And Moscow has said that it has constructive approach when addressing this issue. So we understand that now they will be talking about this initiative and how to proceed with that. Also with Moscow saying that the part of the Black Sea grain deal that was concerning the Russian side has never been implemented. So the negotiations are now in full swing. They are technical, but the serious problems are being resolved there. We understand that that there are even more aspects that have been brought to that agenda, but it is unclear whether the sides will be able to touch upon them because of the complexity of all of the issues. But again, the most important thing at this stage is that there is political will to move forward on the negotiations track. The Russian president will be informed by the negotiators in due time when those talks are over. They are taking place behind the closed doors. No statements to the media are expected. But again, we are sometimes getting some details from the negotiators. Those are very experienced negotiators. Grigory Karasin, veteran diplomat, and Sergei Beseda, who is the advisor to the FSB director. So undoubtedly, Moscow is placing lots of hopes on those negotiations, but also says that you shouldn't expect any quick results because of the complexity of the issues on the table.
Thank you so much to the both of you, Caroline Malone in Washington, D.C., Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow.